Our next speaker needs no introduction. I already heard earlier she is referred to as the sister that gave the awesome talk this morning. So we welcome Sister Mary Madeline.
Hello again. Asking someone to tell a vocation story in a few minutes is like telling the story, if you're married, of how you found your spouse in a few minutes. It's a little tricky, but I'll do it. But I also thought, how can this story be especially relevant to you besides just my story? So it's a lot to do in a few minutes, but I'm going to try. My first point would be simply to say, every vocation is about life-giving love. Every vocation. And every person has a vocation. You know, I think sometimes people think vocation only means the state and life of one who is called to the clergy or called to religious life, or sacramental marriage, but every one of us in this room is called into being by God. Everyone is called to live life-giving love. And we do that at different stages of our life in different pathways. And so I think don't wait or don't think, well, I lived my vocation and now I'm in a different stage, or I'm still finding my vocation. Today, as a baptized Christian, you are called to life-giving love. And for those of us who are called into the religious life, or the priesthood, or marriage, or who are dedicated singles in the church, or consecrated in another form of consecration, the Lord gives us a call because he does care about the dreams he plants in our hearts. One thing I think is that, I heard it in even the story you were talking about, is like sometimes we think we're giving up our dreams to follow what the Lord calls, but what I think is he means to fulfill our dreams maybe in a different way than we thought would happen. And I say that because my dream for my life, my plan, my dream, I always wanted to be married to a wonderful guy. I always wanted to have a lot of kids. For some reason in my head, that was 10. I don't know why I thought I wanted 10 children. No one in my family had 10. Maybe that's why I thought I wanted them, because if I had seen it, I might have changed my mind. But I just wanted a huge family because I always thought more people's better, more love, more joy. And I also wanted to, how I was going to do all this simultaneously is not my strong suit. Okay, I also wanted to be a doctor. In school, I was very much interested in the sciences, and I loved the idea of participating in the healing ministry of Jesus Christ. To me, that was just a passion of mine. And I also liked literature and acting. So I wanted to be a medical doctor, Shakespearean actress on the side, with a great husband and 10 kids. Now, God saved me from myself. But he also showed me something really important about his dreams for us. Because when did I start thinking about it was actually through a series of kind of dramatic things. When I was in high school, I was taught by our sisters, so I saw how joyful and beautiful and faith-filled the sisters were, but it just never even crossed my mind that God would call someone as loud as I am to be a sister, even a Dominican. But I just didn't see myself in that. I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier, is my idea of holiness was maybe a little bit off. Like I thought, you have to be very proper, quiet, prayerful, and I didn't see myself that way. But then when I was 16, some things in my life were not going so well, and I was actually not doing well on a lot of levels, and God let something happen that would wake me up. I was coming home from an event at Mount de Sales, and I was going to the gas station, and it was a rainy night, and I was sitting atop a hill, and a drunk driver crossed the yellow line completely and hit my car full speed head on. And those were before airbags back in the day. And literally, because I lost consciousness, the last thought I had was, what if I took someone's life? I didn't know what had happened. And then when I recovered consciousness, the first thing I saw was more headlights, because I was on Route 1 where there's 8 lanes across and no barrier. So my car had gotten spun and was facing the oncoming traffic. And I just didn't think I was going to live. I tried to make my peace with God at that moment. But amazingly, even when the police and the rescue workers came to the scene of the accident, they didn't even come to my car at first because they said no one can be alive. The car was completely crushed. So they went to his vehicle because it was heavier and because he did the impact, his car wasn't as damaged. So when they eventually came to my car, I had actually regained consciousness, but I couldn't move because the car was crushed around me. And they told me not to move because they thought my spine had snapped and that I was probably paralyzed. So they lifted me out of the car, took me to the hospital, and long story kind of shorter, I actually went home the same night of the accident from the hospital, and I had no long-term injury. And honestly, what happened, why I share that story with you right now is it took something that dramatic for me to awaken to a truth that is true for every one of us. I needed to awaken to the fact that I'm alive for a reason, my life has a purpose, and I need to ask God what that is. I mean, that was really what came for me from that accident. I was like, I shouldn't be here right now. Every witness to the accident said no one could have survived. And so I was like, here I am. There's something you want for me. So I started going to Mass every day, and I never thought of myself as particularly religious, but I just went to Mass because I felt drawn by Jesus. And I started to notice that was my favorite part of every day, was just being with the Lord. And I just started listening. And in the depths of my heart, I could feel him saying, I want you to give me everything, all your dreams, all your plans, all your hopes. And I was like, really? and I mean, I remember just thinking, wow, you gave me back my life. You gave me my life to begin with, and then you gave it back. So who am I to withhold any part of that? But meanwhile, I was actually dating someone that I wanted to marry. And he, even though he was not Catholic, he was open to living the way the church taught, and I was all on board, and I got a full ride scholarship to college. I started the pre-med track. My plan was going, and yet I never had any peace. And every time I would go and just kind of pray quietly, it wasn't like I was unhappy, I just didn't have peace. Because in me, I could feel that the Lord was saying, he was really proposing. He was saying, really, will you put your hand in mine and never take it back out again? And I knew enough, because I was taught by the sisters, that vocation is a call. It's not a command. It's an invitation. Wherever you are, whatever stage in your life you are, the Lord has a plan for you. But he's very gentle. He just says, will you trust me? Will you listen to how I'm asking you to love and serve? And after my first year of college, I couldn't, actually I remember the exact day and where. It was not at the end of the year. My first year of college, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception in the Cathedral of Mary Our Queen, I was going to the University of Notre Dame. Notre Dame University was the college back then. And I went to Mass at the cathedral, and I remember it's the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and I'm sure Our Lady is the one who prayed this grace into my soul. Ask her to help you if you struggle with saying yes to any part of God's plan for you, because she is the absolute queen of how to say yes to God's plan and how to surrender everything and live his dream for you. And so I was there on her feast day, and I was tired of fighting and running, and I just said, Lord, wherever you go, I'll go. And whatever you want from me, I'll do it. And the peace that came into my mind and heart were like nothing I've ever experienced. That doesn't mean the struggle ended. I think it'll end, 10 minutes after I die. But I think that God's dream is your dream, but it might look a little different. Because I always wanted the best husband, and I got him. I always wanted lots of children, and I've taught literally thousands of people in my service as a teacher. And they very much are my spiritual children, carried always in my heart, not just the years I'm teaching them, but when I pray for them over the many years of their lives. I get wedding announcements, birth announcements. I have spiritual grandchildren, babies named for me. Because I see my love, the love the Lord wanted me to live in my spiritual children. And I wanted to be a healer. Now, it took me a long time as a Dominican because I never once thought about teaching or speaking as a job for me. I thought I was going to be a surgeon. And some years into my Dominican vocation, a Dominican preacher from France was speaking to our community, and he said, a Dominican is from the order of preachers. And he said, a preacher is not only a teacher. A preacher is someone who lives the dual ministry of Jesus Christ, someone who teaches unto the healing of the mind and heart. And one of the greatest gifts of my life has been to be called into the ministry of Jesus Christ, that is speaking a word that heals. And the Lord has shown me in many beautiful ways that he wants to do that through the ministry he's entrusted to me. So I invite you, as people of all different stages of your life, walks of life, to stay open to the way God is calling you. That's what the vocation literally means, a calling, okay? To life-giving love where you are right now in your life. You know, I don't believe that state in life is important to discern, and please encourage young people who might be considering priesthood and religious life. You know, I think sometimes our culture is like, oh, look at all you give up, instead of look at all you'll receive. Like, there's something very beautiful about being asked to give your life to serve God's people. But also for you, each of you, to pray for vocations, especially I think, I would say, even as a religious sister, especially vocations to the priesthood. Why do I say that is, I think women's prayers for priests are incredibly powerful. I think we have a Marian place in supporting the apostolic mission of the church. And I know many, many young men who said that they began to consider the priesthood or be open to that when a woman was praying for them or encouraged them. And I think it's part of our ministry as women in the church to be like Mary in the upper room with the apostles, praying with it and praying for. One of my friends was asked to become the vocations director for his diocese. And at the time when he started that ministry, there were 0 seminarians in his diocese. 0. And he started going around and visiting the parishes, and he started saying, we've got to pray for priestly vocations. And they said, oh, nobody wants to be a priest anymore. And he said, if we don't have faith, no wonder we have no vocations. And he said, you got to have faith. God isn't going to abandon his church. And he and his bishop worked together, and they said, every adoration chapel in the diocese, we're going to ask people to pray for all vocations, holy vocations in the church. And we're going to pray for this intentionally. And he said, within 10 years, they went from 0 seminarians to 40, okay? And they now have in their diocese also a house of discernment for young men considering the priesthood. And it wasn't just about every vocation supports every vocation. You know, when those who are dedicated in their single life are really praying and really listening to the Lord, they're serving and building up a civilization of love, a culture of life that supports married people in living their vocation to love one another, to raise their children, to be saints. They're the cradle where vocations to the priesthood and the religious life are coming from. So when we're each living wherever we are called as life-giving love, then I think we're listening to the Lord and saying yes. And let God surprise you. Sometimes the way he calls is different than what you dreamed it would be. But I think the dreams of your heart are a hint of where God is actually leading you. So listen. Thank you. God bless you.